right, we're a month or so into the course. Hopefully your writing's going well. You kind of figured out how this is going. Let's start doing some more Q&A sessions as we start some classes, so I can see what you guys are interested in. Today we are going to focus on character. So if you've got character questions, wait till I give the lecture, and then you can ask next week if there were things I need to cover or whatnot. So if there are questions you had about plotting last week I didn't get to, if there's something I haven't covered, go ahead and throw them at me. All right, go ahead. How to work with pacing the chapter. Okay, let's talk a little bit about this because, yeah. So writing a book is, for most of us, your own process can be way different, but for most of us is about taking something large and breaking it down into smaller and smaller and smaller pieces, right? As I talked about last week, my process is like, break this thing down. Well, one of those small pieces is the chapter, and there's some cool fractal theory here when it comes to writing books. If you really look at it, like a really great paragraph, it displays some of the same structure that a really great book does, and a really great sentence even sometimes has that, and certainly a good chapter will have some of the same feel that a great book has, in that you have beginning, middle, end. Now this is not an exact sort of thing, because a lot of times when you're writing your chapter, you're going to decide to make your chapter. Sometimes you'll have your whole idea of rising action, right? You sometimes want to break your chapter right there, right? It depends on the pacing style you want to go for and what sort of feel you want. A chapter like this is a very different one from a chapter like this, and your break's right there. Well, can you get any guesses how that's going to feel different? Tell me, why would you want to use one rather than the other?
Well, the first one pulls you along into the next one. It's like a cliffhanger. What happens next?
Okay, yeah. Yeah.
The second one is a little bit like Empire Strikes Back, where it ends on a really dark, sour note, and the job of the next chapter is to pick up the pieces.
Okay, well, yeah, you can totally just write a chapter exactly like that. Yeah.
You know what I mean? If this is the tone as opposed to the action.
Right. Yeah. You totally could go. What are the other comments here? Yeah.
A lot of times, well, it's just like if you have it leave in that suspenseful moment in the first, it's kind of a smoother transition probably.
Depends. Smoother, it's going to pull a person forward, but actually this is going to feel more jerky than this. This will feel more smooth in a lot of ways. What's that? It'll just be different. It just depends on what you want to do. But for instance, you can look at this kind of in paragraphing. If your paragraphing is like this, really short paragraphs, what you've got is it's going to feel rushed, exciting, boom, 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 but it also sometimes feels choppy. And it also sometimes feels jerky, where if you've got something, a big paragraph like this actually is going to read more smoothly a lot of times, but it's also going to read a little slowly and dull, not dull, but you know what I mean, when someone looks at a big chapter or the paragraph like this, it's the same thing with your chapters. And so if you're reading, if you want to example this, a lot of the contemporary thrillers pace like this. The chapters are short. They're maybe like 5 pages, and they always end like that, and then immediately bring you up and break, and bring you up and break, and bring you up and break like this. And I'm talking about this in the sense of how the action is going, and the sort of tone of the chapter, you know. So at the end of this chapter, our break right here is someone has pulled out a gun and pointed at you. You diffuse this problem, you kind of have some denouement of it, you start to raise another problem, and you break right here, and you hear a car crash outside, and you break to the next chapter. And there's always this sense of pulling you along. This gets very fatiguing for readers. But this works very well in a sort of a short style novel, a short thriller pace novel. A lot of these thrillers take place. It's like the show 24. All right, did you guys watch this? It's not kind of old, but if you watch this, that show is fatiguing. You watch that, there is not a chance, but at the breaks are the high points of tension, and so you can't relax. And so if your breaks are high points of tension, yeah, that's what happens. Whereas if you do a chapter like this, where it's a big kind of long, meaty chapter, it's more like a paragraph like this. It's kind of got this sort of flow and arc to its own chapter. You wrap up the end, and it gives a sense at the end of, okay, now you can take a break. Some books never want to do that. Some books, it's useful to do that. Say, okay, you've read this big chunk. Now you can take a break. This book, in a big 1,000-page epic fantasy, I don't like to do too much of this personally, because you can't pull someone 1,000 pages, really. There's going to be multiple sittings to read this book. So I like to use this pacing, and then only break into this when we've got moments of great tension and action. Your question, how do I do this for a chapter? Comes down to the, number one, what sort of pacing you're going to be using. And these are only like two extremes. There's all sorts of different ways to do this. What are you trying to achieve? Every chapter, like a book, should introduce problems and then deal with them. Have sort of what we call the try-fail cycle. And when I talked about plotting, I didn't tell you about the try-fail cycle, which is the concept, very simple concept, that if you introduce a problem, the character should try reasonable, intelligent means by getting past this problem and fail twice in doing so. Just a rule of thumb. If they try to solve the problem, they do what the reader would say, oh, that's the answer, well, I would do this. They try that and they fail, and yet they've tried something good, it maybe should have worked, but it doesn't, and then the reader's like, oh, well, that didn't work, I'd be in the same boat, but I maybe would try this, and they try that, and that fails. You've got this heightening of tension, and this sort of sense of the reader is smart, and the characters are smart. They're not trying dumb things, they're trying smart things. And so you've got this sense of your chapter where they try something and then they fail. And so you've got this whole, you guys remember this, right? From your high school classes, the whole mounting tension thing where each of these is where, something goes wrong, or you can even say they fix something, but then it starts getting more and more broken. You just kind of have to decide what your chapter is trying to achieve. I feel that a great chapter introduces or deals with a problem, has a resolution unto itself, but also gives hints of what's going to happen next. Whether that hint is someone opens the door and there's a gun on the other side, or whether it is, okay, we've solved this, but that's only a small piece of the much larger puzzle that we're working on. All right? Okay, anything else you guys are curious? Yeah.
What's an easy way to do like a proof of concept of a novel before committing time and energy into something that might actually suck?
Proof of concept, there is, this question is laden with issues. Because if you are a new writer, it most likely is going to suck. There's a chance it's not going to, but it most likely will. And the only way to make it not suck is to let it suck first until you get good enough to write things that don't suck. And in that case, it doesn't matter what you're writing as long as you're excited about it. Does that make sense? And so it's a question that it's hard to answer because you're like, yeah. And then I will try to pick out really what I think you're asking, which is, granted, Brandon, you said that ideas are cheap, and I just need to practice things, but some ideas are better than others. And some things you write and just, they don't end up working, and some do end up working. The problem here is that's so individual to you that I can't tell you what's going to end up not working for you. You've got to learn your own process well enough that when you try something, it doesn't end up working. Like, for instance, if you're a discovery writer, that's a very different process. You have to just try it out to see if it feels right. If you're an outliner, you have to have usually some really exciting thing you want to get to that pulls you through the story toward it. And so, what is proof of concept? Is it you write a chapter in the character voice, works really well, and you're excited about writing more about this character? That could be proof of concept. But at the same time, if you write that and you're like, wow, this isn't very good, well, you may not be very good yet. And so anything you write, you're going to say, wow, this isn't very good yet. You just have to practice. It's just like saying, what's my proof of concept? I want to be able to play Rachmaninoff. I'm going to sit down, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. That does not sound like Rachmaninoff. Obviously, I'm doing something wrong. No, you don't know how to play Rachmaninoff yet because you're a new pianist. So learning Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star is good for you. So I'm not sure how to answer that. Right. If you're not excited about it, then something's probably wrong. I don't know what that something is. It's individual to you. Do know that sometimes it is just a slog to write no matter what, and you just have to push through anyway. It's not all sunshine and dancing with unicorns and things like that. All right, other questions? Yes.
That cute little one over there in the blonde hair is my wife.
Okay.
When we write, we often like go back and forth. Like we need to vocalize before we know whether or not we like a poem or whether or not we figured out the book.
Okay.
Do you do that, or are there alternate methods you use? Or
No. I'm very solitary in my writing. I will occasionally brainstorm with my writing group if I have problems. And that works very well for me because I know my writing group really well. I know the people, they know my writing, and I can make use of them as a resource. That whole collaborative writing thing is not something I do a lot of. A lot of writers really love it. And so find Eric Flint and ask him, or find Tracy Hickman and ask him. Talk to people who do collaborative writing. I don't know. Different processes work for different people. I know Mary Robinette Cole, she has to read every book of hers out loud during the editing process before she knows if it's right or not. That's because she does so much. She reads audiobooks and things, and she's very, very good at that sort of thing. So dialogue she won't know until she reads it. So I don't know. Use what works for you. It's the problem with answering these questions. Is a lot of times I'm going to say, figure out your process, see what works for you, and the answer is, if it makes you write good stuff that you enjoy writing, then it's working. All right. Yes.
Along those same lines, because in his class we're obviously writing kind of chapter by chapter and then having
Yes.
people read it. Would you recommend that for normal book writing or just?
For most people, I would suggest you finish the book before you workshop it. Not as viable in a class like this, but normally I suggest that. It's not a hard, fast rule. For some writers, getting a chapter, having it critiqued will make you really excited about writing further. For a lot of writers, getting something critiqued while you're working on it can be a real downer. Because even though I insist in writing groups, point out what's working, your writing group is going to harp on all the stuff that isn't working. You're going to be like, what am I doing? Beyond that, there is the danger, I think I mentioned during the first week, that your writing group would say, wouldn't it be awesome if, and then suddenly your book takes a 90-degree turn and turns into something completely different because your writing group brainstormed this cool idea that really belongs in a different book that you just latch onto and go. That's much more a problem with discovery writers. I've had a few in my writing groups that's happened to. So I would suggest trying finishing the entire story and workshopping it, but be aware that if you do it and it makes you more excited after workshopping a piece, if you don't have, for instance, some writers, I have friends that if they don't have a writing group deadline, an artificially created, but a deadline, they don't write their chapter that week and turn it in. I know professional cowboy writers that are like this. And so if that's what works for you, then the writing group has this other set of tools to you that gets you to do your writing that you want to be doing, but having a deadline means that, less Bejeweled or whatever the kids play these days, more writing, then yeah. All right? Okay. Anything else? All right, let's talk about characters. Oh, was there another question? We'll do this one, then we'll do characters.
I've been working on the novella, and
Yes.
I'm trying to combine an alchemist type feel to a craft.
Okay.
And I went back to your Mistborn and started reading a little bit about, or starting it off, and you have a way of making a magic system or something like that seem historically believable.
Okay.
And as I'm looking at as I'm looking at my attempts at alchemy, I'm looking at it saying, I want to make something in the future that could be
Right.
based on things that probably won't work, but I want it to have a feel of a historical significance.
Okay, we will talk a lot about magic systems next week.
Okay.
So that's one of our things. Just to give you something to work on right now, a lot of what we do in writing, as I mentioned on a previous week, is like being a stage magician. You're holding up the whatever and distracting them over here while you're doing something else with the other hand. And with world building, you gotta have. You can do what Tolkien did and spend 20 years. All right, that is perfectly legit. And for a lot of the big series, I mean, Robert Jordan spent years planning, and a lot of times for lots of books, for instance, the Stormlight Archive, I spent a lot of time on my world building. For other books, I don't spend that much time. I don't have that much time. The book doesn't demand that much time. But either way, you want to sort of have the iceberg feel to it, whether the rest of the iceberg is there or not. And this is the idea that most of the iceberg is submerged, right? So when they see that tip of the iceberg, the world building that you're giving them, you want to indicate that you know all of this other stuff, whether you do or whether you don't. But you don't want to throw the whole iceberg at them. You want to indicate that it's there to give the illusion that this is a real world. This is much more important in epic fantasy than in some other genres. It depends on the genre you're writing. What is the goal of people reading your writing? Why are they picking up this book? A lot of us read epic fantasy for the sense of immersion. In that case, you want a lot of the iceberg theory to work. If people are picking up a Michael Crichton book, which is basically a thriller with some science fiction trappings, they're not looking for world building, they're looking for cool scientists pulling off a heist of some sort, right? And so that feel, you need a very different style of world building. In his case, he needs to give an indication to you that yes, this science is completely plausible. In fact, we're probably going to do it tomorrow. And that's the only world building he needs to do. Read a Michael Crichton book. That's what he does. You'll read it and be like, wow, why don't we have dinosaurs yet? He makes it sound like we just should. You want to give the sense of this totally could work. And so the iceberg. How do you do the iceberg? I'll give you some clues tomorrow, but one of the things to do is remember that the small concrete detail is worth way more than a page of description in a lot of places. When, if you think about, all right, how would someone who really knows horses talk about a horse and give a one-line description that they would give of a horse? One line, one sentence, and then compare that to what someone who doesn't know horses would say about the horse. And you can get a feel for like, okay, look at these two different sentences. This is an expert, this is not. If your character talks and thinks like an expert, then you will give a sense of the rest of all of this. Now the trick is to do that without confusing them. I don't mean lots of jargon, but you know, the expert can say, wow, that horse needs new shoes. When the layman's like, I hope it doesn't kick me. Right? And if your characters can do that, then it'll feel more real. Another way to, something that people kind of fall into is the way they talk about it. People in books, and it may be appropriate for your book to use the phrase, let's go do some magic. But if you think about our world, the way we talk, we don't use phrasings like that. Let's go do some science. If we say that, we're being joking. Let's go do some physics. That's not how we do it. It's not how we talk about it. The doctors are not like, let's go do some surgery. Let's go doctor people. And a lot of times the terminology based around magic that we see in fantasy novels feels off to us and feels like a construct because it's not how people legitimately talk about their professions and things like this. And so making it legitimately talk like the profession and things like that, all of these are sort of the trappings that give the sense that this is real. All right? So we'll talk a lot more about magic next week, and then on the prose week we'll talk more about this idea of the concrete small detail and how important the concrete small detail is. Okay? All right. So, characters. Characters, I believe, are the most important part of the story in most of the genres we're writing. There are genres where the character is secondary to the plot in a small measure. This is this weird thing that I think I talked about in the first week, where we read science fiction and fantasy because of the world building. It's what distinguishes our genre from another. And yet, most of the time, if we were to pick up a book with great characters and lukewarm world building, we would still enjoy that book. But if we picked up a book with great world building and weak characters, then we're probably not going to enjoy that book as much. And so, despite the fact that we love the world building, the characters have to pull us through. Now, you can't have those plot-centered books. where, character is something else. But let's see. Let's put up these three things. What did I say that were the kind of three areas of making a character that people want to read about? They are active. They are competent. And likable. Now these are my artificial definitions of something that you'll see other people talk about in different ways. That's perfectly all right. This is not a law. This is a method that I have started to use to look at things. So we've got active, we've got competent, and we've got likable. And let's talk about the idea of sympathy. So in a book, we are building sympathy. This is the sort of idea of, what makes something... sympathy may not be the right thing because you can have, again, the active and competent and unlikable. And that character will be compelling to us. We will want to read about that character. We love watching, movies about the villains who are these. Let's talk first, though, about the idea of a hero. Why... looking at this sort of thing, is the hero's journey so interesting to us? It has to do with some of these things.
I think because generally it encourages the hero to start off as active and likable and develop competency.
I think you nailed it right there. Particularly, really, they start off likable. This is kind of the core of the hero's journey story. And it is the core of a lot of sympathetic characters. Is you start with somebody likable. In fact, if you start with somebody likable, if you can really show one of these three in chapter 1, you're probably going to be okay. What are some books or movies you have experienced where they just start off with a likable person? No activity really, no competence, they're just likable. Wall-E. Wall-E's really competent though, kinda. But yeah, okay, he's not very, okay, Wall-E is just likable. Right, okay.
Lord of the Rings.
Lord of the Rings is a perfect example. Frodo, Bilbo's probably a better example just because we start off with how likable Bilbo is. He's just like us. We enjoy Bilbo. Is he active? No. Is he competent? Unless you count, knowing how to fill a larder? No, he's not. But he is likable. Do you remember any, let's see, what are some shows you've seen that somebody just starts off really active? We don't know if we like them or not. We don't know if they're competent. They just do stuff.
James Bond movies usually start like that.
James Bond's movies usually start, they go to competence really quickly, don't they? But yeah. Sherlock, okay. The BBC show. He is not very likable. No, okay. It depends on how... yes, okay. So, the people around him don't consider him very likable. Iron Man's like that too. Iron Man's very active. We start off, he's off selling stuff and things. We don't know how competent he is, but he's active. He's doing stuff. Indiana Jones is a really good example of this. When you start Indiana Jones, if you shake yourself back just to the first Indiana Jones movie, not knowing anything, and just watching this movie, you don't know if you're going to like him. You don't even know if he's competent, but he is leading the way toward this awesome thing. You see him use his whip, you see him being awesome, and by the end, you're not even still sure how competent he is. Right? Of the intro, because everything goes wrong. He completely fails to do the thing he's wanting to do, and the bad guys win. And all this stuff. But he was so lasted active in that you love him. And then later on you see more of why he's likable and things like this, but he is active, all right? And these two kind of go in hand in hand. But let's talk about the likable. So how do we make characters likable? What makes a likable character? Yes?
Relatability.
Relatability. What does relatability mean?
It means the reader themselves can see something of themselves in the character.
Okay. Very good. Relatable. See something of self. What are some strategies for doing this?
Giving them worries, giving them...
Okay. Real life concerns, right? Let's put subheading here. Real life. Okay, why does that work? Someone else. What's the point of this?
Because the reader becomes part of the story.
Maybe it becomes part of the story, okay.
They have to have flaws that you can relate to.
Okay, we're going to put this whole thing over here, flaws. Because we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But yes, you're really right here, we're not talking about flaws. He mentioned concerns, really right here, that's an important one. But we're talking about, I need to get my homework done, right? They've got real life concerns. If I don't get my homework done, if I don't pass, my entrance exams or whatever. I mean, it's a way that you can make someone relatable despite their world being very different. Yes?
I feel like,
Yeah, back here and then up here.
I feel like having them have those kind of real life concerns, it's kind of like we were talking about last week about promises, that you're promising them that they have these concerns, but they'll be able to overcome them, and so we'll want to read it because
Okay.
it might help
You're
us
giving
in
that
our
sense
lives.
of progress. You're like, they have a concern, we're going to deal with this.
And you might learn something to help your life.
A fun example of this is, I think, Ron Weasley, where he's complaining about essay lengths and how he's
Right.
done everything he can, and he can't get it to, a roll of parchment or whatever it is.
Right. It's a roll of parchment. It's bizarre, and yet, yeah, it's a real life relatable thing.
So, I feel like anything that has relevance to you personally is really exciting. It can be concerns, but it can also be like a goal that you have.
Okay.
To be in love or to be an excellent sports person or something, that you're like, wow, this is what I want to read about,
No, I think you're exactly right. The relatability, the goals of the character are another kind of cornerstone of this. If they have passions, here's the thing, even if they aren't terribly active, though we're going to start about this, we really want them to be more confident, if they have something they really like, they really want, suddenly it works. The Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies, how do those start? You guys remember? You guys watch these? Or? It's the story about a girl. He is a geek who is in love with the girl next door who, he thinks is totally friend-zoning, right? That's the story that they start the Spider-Man movies with. And it works wonderfully because you're going and it's like, all right, this is going to be really weird. He gets bitten by a radioactive spider. We know he's going to be doing all this weird stuff. But it starts with, I am in love with this person, and I wish I could find a way to let her know. Relatability, goals, passions. All right, what else makes a character relatable? Or what else makes a character likable? Oh, then we'll look here. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was wondering if fears would fall into this category.
Sure, yeah. Fears. Fears are the exact same sort of thing.
Kindness and decency.
Okay, kindness. Right. Now this is kind of under the likable rather than relatable. There's an adage in Hollywood, right? If you want to show the reader very quickly, or the viewer, who the protagonist is, you have them pet a puppy. And if you want to show who the villain is, they kick a puppy. You don't actually want to do that, though. There's a Ted Williams book where, very early in the first book, a guy, there's this, poor runt puppy. He's like the nobleman. He, steps on it under the table and runs his neck or something. And you're like, you're the bad guy. I hate you, and I hated that guy.
Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, that's how he introduced Mr. Hyde. He's the type of man who would walk over a child in his way rather than go around.
There you are. There you are. And so, yeah, the whole puppy thing has gotten a little bit cliched, but yeah, if you show everyday human kindness in the beginning, then you are making someone likable. Any other strategies you guys can think of? Okay?
Would confidence actually help with likability?
Okay, confidence does, yes. It does help with likability. These things blend together. One thing that I have noticed as an author that makes people likable is having friends. The moment somebody has a friend, particularly if that friend likes them, we don't even have to like or know the character. Knowing that someone else thinks highly of them will immediately predispose us to liking them more ourselves. There's a brilliant moment in the Tim Burton Batman where they have introduced the Joker as having a right-hand man who's kind of his buddy. You guys seen this movie? Mm-hmm. Near the end of the climax, he shoots him for no good reason. He's just like, oh yeah, hey, hand me your gun, and then shoots him. this is a subversion of this idea. We actually like the Jack Nicholson Joker a lot because of his buddies. And then when he does something that insane, we're like, this guy needs to die. So yeah, having friends. Immediately having friends will help us with that. All right, let's talk about making our characters active. Now, this relates to the reason that it's an important thing to talk about is it relates to a major storytelling problem, which is what we call the villain problem. You will find people writing about it online and discussing this concept. The villain problem is that a lot of the very best characters, the most noble and goodly characters, would do nothing if the villains didn't come in and ruin everything. Like some of the things we admire about characters are that they're saving people, they're fighting the villain, all these things. And if there is no trouble, then the hero doesn't do anything. He or she is inactive. And this is actually a larger problem than you might think, because this whole idea of activity building a sympathetic character means that we have this habitual problem with if we show the villains too much and show them doing too much, then the reader starts to sympathize with them more because the hero's just sitting around waiting for the villain to do nefarious acts so they can go foil them. And the villain is then the active one. Your job, when you're writing the book, your story, is to decide how can I make sure that I'm putting the focus of activity on the character that I want to. You may want to be writing a book about how awesome the villain is. Artemis Fowl, a children's series, is built around the idea that he is the villain, and he is super active, and we love him. And really he's not, because he's really likable as well, because he's like, I want to find my parents. But he's supposed to be the villain. They're a middle grade series, and so it's you can get away with this whole, he's the villain, everybody, and they're like, yeah, he's the villain, even though he's really not that bad a guy. But you may want to be writing a book about the villain. But the idea is you want to be doing these things intentionally. You want to have making the reader's attention on the active character. The other big issue is if you're using a plotting structure such as the hero's journey, or a lot of these ones we've talked about, 3-act structure does this too. The idea is at the beginning, the hero does not want to protag. The hero has to be forced into it, and then there's the calling, which they reject at the first time, and then the second time they accept it. Again, don't use these things as strict ways to write, but the idea is that initially the hero is reluctant. Why do we like reluctant heroes? Why do we want to write them? What makes us, because that flies in the face of this. We think that normally we just want to do it. What makes it work?
It's relatable. They're comfy in their life. They have
Yeah.
a life like ours, and they want to get
Yeah.
back.
Yeah, that whole idea of the fears, the real life concerns, they're relatable. There's some other reasons.
It's actually kind of fun to see them kicked around for a little while.
Yeah, it builds sympathy. We should have put this one under here. Picked on. Getting picked on is a big one for building sympathy and likability. We like underdogs, right? And for whatever silly reason in our brains, we love the underdog. It doesn't matter, if we don't know which two teams are playing, if we hear the one's winning, we naturally want the other one to start doing better. I guess it's because we're naturally nice. I don't know what it is. But being picked on, losing, we like this thing. There is also a natural instinct on the part of the writer, I would hope is part of the reason for this, of knowing that you need to give a sense of progress. And so the lower you start the character, the more progress you can show for the character, which is a good natural instinct. However, all of these things sort of fight against this concept. So let's talk about it. Why are active characters, why are they appealing? What's at the core of this? Yes?
Stuff gets done.
Stuff gets done? Okay. Let's put over here active. Why? Okay, stuff gets done. Okay. That says stuff. Why else is this appealing to read about? Yes?
I have a friend, a Satan girl.
Uh-huh.
She's wants to leave the country for a year. He's freaking out.
Mm-hmm.
So, you can tell her that he really, really wants to be with her, he wants all this and that, and then she's probably going to be like, well, he's just too available, he's here too much.
Okay.
and whatever. Or you can be like, hey, if you're gonna do this, this doesn't work for me, sorry, it's over. And it's interesting, because a lot of times people who care the least have a control over a relationship.
Interesting. Okay.
And so like, a lot of times people want to be needed, they want to express affection, and they want to hear someone express it, but the second someone does it, they're like, oh, they weren't home with it.
Okay.
And so there's just an interesting nature inside of people. And so there's just different dynamics, like you want somebody to be really, really close, but at the same time you want somebody, it's like girls love it when a guy's helplessly attracted to them, but at the same time they want a guy who practices self-discipline.
I think that could be applied to both genders.
Or, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's just, there's just more dynamics, it's like how walls and
Okay.
that's part of it, and so it's a question of active character, typically someone is more professional.
They're in control of the story. You get a sense that somebody's in control of the story. I like that idea. Yeah. Right here.
It's boring if nothing happens.
Okay. They make it not boring. Okay. It goes to that sense of progress, right? When somebody immediately starts doing something, we get a sense of progress. We like them because they're moving our story along.
Plus it's empowering, like to read about people actively, changing their lives and dealing with problems, it makes us feel like we can do the same.
Yeah, in fact, I'm going to put that one underneath competent over here as well. Because these two bleed a lot. If you look at the idea of storytelling and why we read stories, there's a whole lot of theory on this. Why do we read stories? Part of it is this sense of catharsis. That we get to see something happen, we get to experience what's going on, but we get to experience it in a sort of safe environment where it's like, all right, all this dangerous, terrible stuff happened, but it didn't happen to me, and then it turned out all right. That's why my son likes these shows that I told you about last week. When he figured out the heroes always win, he gets really tense, but then he relaxes, and he knows he's been through this. There is also the idea that every sort of story that we read, we are looking for a little bit of wish fulfillment. We want to see somebody do something very competent and empowering because we like this idea that maybe we can do that too. And so one reason why the idea of the hero's journey is so powerful is because you start off with somebody like this, as has been said, and go to somebody like this. And so you start with somebody who has no power in their life, and we see them become someone who is extraordinarily empowered in their life, and it has a sense of progress, and it's like we can see someone like us become someone like we want to be. And those are the two basic ideas. We read about people who are like us, and people who are like what we would like to be. And a lot of the best characters are going to mix these two attributes. They're going to have something about them that we admire and wish that we could be, and they are going to have something about them that we see in ourselves. And every character is a shake-up mix of this. And if they're not likable, but have all of that, that's where we get into the really horrifying villains. The ones where you say, I see myself in this character, I see how competent and evil they can be, that's truly frightening. So, that's, yeah. Anyway, let's go ahead, back over here. How do we make our characters active? My big question for you now is, how do you make them active? Understanding that sometimes you want to have them being picked on and kicked around, or you want to have this sort of reluctant hero. It's easy to make the hero active if they are not the reluctant hero. And those are great stories. James Bond has been brought up. James Bond is very active. You always start a James Bond story with James Bond doing something awesome. You too can start your book with someone doing something awesome. That's the easiest way. What else?
I like the example of the boy on Home Alone.
Okay.
It wasn't that he was empowered. He didn't say no to what he had to do. He just kind of was stuck. And then he didn't really have a choice but to deal with it. And,
right. Yeah, his call to arms was, you have no other choice. You are now in this terrible situation. Rise up and accept it or not.
Yeah, I like that.
He ran around terrified first, though.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is part of that.
How clever he was about it and how he didn't wait for the villains to just do their villain stuff.
Right. let's talk about the beginning of a book, though, because it's actually a lot easier to have your character active in Act 3. In Act 3, where you're like, keep in mind, you've got to learn to do this. I don't want to gloss over it, but we talked about last week the idea of, you have the character, they're kind of, they've got the whole Newton's Law thing, they're an object of rest, something has forced them now to move, and then by Act 3, they're like, I'm going to do this. And then they do, this awesome plan or whatever. What about Act 1? How do you do this at the beginning of a book?
Give them something they really want.
Okay.
Have them search for something they really want. Desire.
That says have them involved in something else that they're passionate about. This comes down to one of my sort of big philosophies about writing characters. And it starts with a story. My very first book that I completed had a very large problem. And that was that I did a pretty decent job with the main character, and every other character felt very wooden. Particularly the female lead. And I'm like, why am I writing such bad characters around this character who is so interesting and dynamic? And what it came down to me, was I was writing everyone else to a role. In fact, I was writing everyone to a role. Their role in the story determined who they were. And because of that, I spent the reason that the main character was working was mostly because I had done these things, not because it felt real. Because there's this other sort of nebulous element about characters, which is their realness. Which is not necessarily a measure of sympathy. We are often very fond of non-real characters. Their realness is this other attribute. And their realness is going to make the reader get emotionally involved with them. It's going to make them feel like a real person, and it's what's going to inspire the devotion to character that lasts through the book. Rather than the book that you read and you're like, oh, that was interesting, and you put the book down and never really worry about it again. A lot of, my favorite science fiction stories don't really achieve this. And that's okay. They're very short stories. They're dealing with these things, mostly these two, and a plot problem. And you read the story, you like it, but at the end of the day, if someone says, well, who was the story about? You're like, there was a robot. And you can't really put a finger on why the characters feel real. Well, the realness it comes from, in my opinion, partially, this idea of making the character have a life other than the plot. Now, they may not have to be able to interact with that life very much. They may be kind of forced along this plot, but they had a life. They have things that they're passionate about. They have things that they would like to do. They have family. They have hobbies. They have professions. They have relationships. And they have all these things. And this comes to this iceberg idea that I was talking about. Give this realness, you have to have a sense as a reader what this character would be doing with their life if the plot had never come along and broadsided them. If you were to go out for hot chocolate with this character, do you get a sense that you know what they would talk about, what they would be like, and these sorts of things? Or can you not imagine this character except in the context of being the hero of this plot?
So this is Luke Skywalker complaining about wanting to go to Tashi Station.
This is Luke Skywalker complaining about the water condensers and things like that. Exactly.
I think like one of my favorite examples of this is Hellboy, which is weird because he's actually like a demon.
Right.
He looks like a weird creature, but I could totally picture him just in his normal life. If he'd never been.
Yeah, if he didn't have to go out and save people, you get a sense of what he would be doing. It involves kittens and cigars. Right? But you can say that. There are a lot of characters that I couldn't say. What are they passionate about if they weren't, doing this? A lot of characters feel like they are just this thing in a plot. We'll go right here and then over here.
There's a kind of an embarrassing example. Downton Abbey is really good at this. The characters are always bantering about things that you've never seen reference to in the show, but it's definitely part of their lives, even though
it's not embarrassing to enjoy a Yeah. My wife watches and I have to sort magic cards when it's on. I
mean, the one that comes to mind is Batman, a very popular character, but I have no idea what he'd be doing if it wasn't for the fact he was Batman.
Right, and I think that the newer incarnations have done a better and better job of this. And it's one of the things you can kind of see a lot of these characters, honestly. If you look back at some of the classic characters, a lot of them you can't imagine in their original incarnations really going out for a cup of cocoa. Right? I can't say coffee, it would be way up. You can't imagine that. You instead are like, yeah, well what do they do is, they are the hero! And, you know, like, if you go pretty like the early Superman, it's just like, he's always heroing! And even when he's Clark Kent, it's like, you know, square-jawed, heroing Clark Kent. And it's like, he fulfills a role rather than being a person. And this, you know, storytelling was much younger then. This style of storytelling and things like that. It's no knock against the creators, but there's a reason why when the new wave of superhero comics, I use those examples because it's very obvious. You can see where it changes, where Stan Lee starts coming along, and one of the big things that he did was like, hey, these guys have real lives. They are a superhero team who doesn't get along, and they disagree. And here's Spider-Man. He's a super nerd. And yet, he also gets these superpowers. And you can see, you know what Spider-Man would be doing. You know what Peter Parker, he's going to be trying to pass his classes and get an A, and, you know, be ignored by the girl, and be picked on by the bullies, and yes, it's a cliche, but you know what he's doing. He feels like he's got a life other than all of this. And the movie's got that across very well. And you see, like, this idea of all these people having real lives. This is very important, and I think it ties into what I erased over here that we're going to start on next, which is the idea of flaws, passions, quirks, and areas of expertise. When you're building this character, you want to be thinking about these sorts of things. You want to be asking yourself, what are they passionate about other than the plot? If your character is only passionate about the plot, they get very annoying very quickly. A famous example of this for me, I'm using stuff that's all like before your time, I think. But you guys watch Lost? You ever see that? It's like old now, right? Lost has this character who is this kind of really interesting character until like midway through the first season where his son gets kidnapped. And suddenly his defining characteristic becomes, my son is gone. My son has been kidnapped. And, you know, everyone's sitting around talking about whatever problem that's facing them. Giant monster's going to eat us. What do we do? It's like, we should do this. We should do this. My son! We should do this. And you're like, dude, we know, but come on, giant monster. My son is gone! And every moment you go to this character, it's like this really annoying cliche. By like the third or fourth episode, we're like, kill his son, please. Kill him. Because only the plot had come to matter, or even only one thing had come to matter about this character. It's the difference between characterization and what we call caricature, or melodrama. Melodrama is a story in which a character is given one predominant emotion that they're supposed to evoke in the reader, and they're only allowed that one emotion. And these are fun stories. We laugh at them. But every character has one thing. You guys have seen one, I assume. You know, the villain comes on, twirls his mustache, and you're supposed to boo. The female lead comes on, you're like, ah, and all she does is float around and bob around. And the hero comes on, you know, he's square-jawed and whatever it is, and you're supposed to cheer. And you have one emotion when that character comes on stage. You really want to avoid that. Really want to avoid that. Unless you're drawing cartoons, and then you can, you know, do caricatures as you want. No. I think that Howard would tell you, in fact he probably will when he comes to teach this semester, that when you're doing cartoons you need a lot of variety to the characters so that you don't end up becoming Garfield. which is defined by one or two attributes. It's funny, but it has no emotionally powerful connection to the reader, and you're not compelled to read a lot more stories about this character. So, flaws, passions, quirks, experience. Let's talk about that. So, you guys kind of have this idea down. You know how to make somebody likable, probably. I hope that you do. People tend to be pretty good at this. This one, new authors tend to be pretty bad at. Sometimes they're good at it. A lot of times they're bad at it. To make someone active at the beginning of the story, if you're going to have this story where they're picked on, and they are a nerd or whatever it is, and they're not active, make them active about something else. Whether it's simply, I've got to study for this test, or I need to collect the last figure for my collection that I will then have them all, and I need to get this one, and it's only being sold at this special place at Comic-Con, and I need to get in, and, whatever it is. It's a fantasy story, it can be, I need to show my dad that I can take care of the sheep, and they're not going to get eaten. Whatever it is, oh no, there's a dinosaur, they're going to get eaten. You can have them interested in something that does not necessarily mean that they have to be really competent at it, and it does not have to be the main thing of the quest. Starting your kid who is watching the flocks with sitting there and drawing a picture of the butterfly he's seen instead of watching the flocks. Okay, he's incompetent, there's a dinosaur eating his flocks, but he's drawing this really good cool butterfly. He's doing something. He's not sitting there and dreaming, which is kind of the problem of, we've read so many stories about characters like, someday I want to be, and they just sit there and think about it, and think about it, and think about it. Start your story with the character doing something, not thinking about doing something, okay? Very big distinction there.
First thing that came to mind is How to Train Your Dragon.
Yeah.
The problem is, dragons are killing our flocks, but and the kid is like, he's not fighting the dragons, but he's tinkering with his stuff. And,
he's trying to prove himself to his father, is what the kid's really trying to do.
Oh, yeah.
He's really passionate about proving himself to his father. But yes, and he's gonna do his thing. That's a great story. It starts off with the kid doing something, and he does stuff all through the story. He's always doing stuff. He's bumbling through it, but he's always doing stuff. But you can start your story with an inactive character doing things. Okay? We really need to move on from this topic. Okay? So let's move over here. What time do we have?
20 minutes left.
20 minutes. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'll do that. All right. So let's talk about this. This is what people talk about, or they mean, when they're talking about characters who are round. You may have heard that phrase, round. This character feels flat to me. What usually someone means when they're giving the criticism of this character feels flat, what they're saying is this character feels like they only display one emotion or invoke one emotion. Evoke one emotion in readers, right? They create one emotion or they display one emotion. Or they feel like they only exist to move the plot along. We want to make a character round. A lot of times people suggest using quirks as means of doing this. Quirks. Quirks can be fun. They can make your character distinctive. You can go overboard with quirks so easily and make your character into something silly. Be careful about quirks. What are some of your favorite quirks for characters? By a quirk, I'm going to define as, if you have this character in the plot, if you were to say, this character does this, you would not immediately associate them with this quirk. Okay, there are some hands back here. Yes?
There's a character in the Wheel of Time that collects swear words
Right.
in different languages, and even when she's in a situation later that makes her very annoying, in several ways, like this still kind of pops up, and it kind of
she
reminds
collects
you, like,
curses.
she's more than that.
You don't expect the character in her role to be the person who collects curses.
Yeah.
That's perfect. Great example. Yeah.
One of my favorites is David in Steelheart, trying to create metaphors.
Yeah, bad metaphors. That one grew very naturally. I don't know. Have I told you guys this? Like, I was writing his voice. I'm like, this voice, the character's voice needs to work real well. Thank you, your check's in the mail for talking about how awesome I am. I'm trying to write this character. I'm like, this character feels really, I didn't think they felt flat, but they felt one-dimensional. I guess they did feel flat. He was passionate about only one thing. Like, this character has only one, he's a one-trick pony. and I'm writing it first person, this narrative needs to go somewhere. This voice needs to go somewhere. So I'm trying out the voice, I'm writing along, and I come along to this place where you, in a story, write a metaphor. It was like this. And writing good metaphors is actually hard. And so I wrote one, I'm like, that is terrible, Brandon. It's a really bad metaphor. And it was bad enough to make me laugh. Because sometimes their metaphors are so bad to make you laugh. And so I left it. And then I came to another place and I tried to do it again. And it was really hard. It was harder than making the good metaphor in the first place. But when I came up with one that was equally bad, it made me laugh even more. And so it just grew very naturally for this character that he admires good metaphors and he's bad at doing it himself. And it allowed me to have another dimension to the character. It wasn't just he was passionate about this. I added on the whole gun nut thing for the same reason. When I was building, I'm like, what can he be really interested in? What do you see him talking about if the plot weren't happening? He'd be telling you about how cool his gun is. And he'd probably be comparing it to a banana because it makes perfect sense to him. And so these things, it's nice when they grow naturally as a writer, I guess is what I'm saying. But that was a fun one for me to write. I really enjoyed that. What other characters have you read that have quirks? We'll go red shirt and then back.
Not what I read, but in Zombieland, the Twinkie guy.
I don't know Zombieland. So.
There is a zombie apocalypse, and the guy is running around, and all he wants to do is he's like, oh, let's go look for Twinkies.
Okay, awesome, good.
One of my favorites is Dr. Bishop in Fringe.
Okay.
He's doing an autopsy while eating licorice, and he's always got licorice somewhere in the lab, and he's got a lot of other quirks. But I mean, that one is just kind of add-ons with his job.
Yeah.
Of course, this makes me think of the first episode of Firefly where he watched Playing with his Dinosaurs.
Right. Watch Playing with his Dinosaurs is great. One of those great moments to really get across the character has a life. Now, why we love these. Coming up with a good quirk is a great thing for a character. But you have to be really careful. Let me put this up here. Don't let it define them. Okay? Particularly for a main character. Side characters, sometimes, like the Twinkie guy. I haven't seen the show, but, at some points you're like, this guy's thing is Twinkies. We really just gotta let this guy's thing be Twinkies. We can't make everybody, and you probably can't make everybody a super round character. But for your main characters in particular, be careful of letting any one thing define them, and be careful of letting the quirk become too much a part of the plot. The idea for it being a quirk is it is part of their nature as a person. It is irrelevant to the plot in most cases. It is simply something that that is about them that is weird. Because nobody should fit their role perfectly. When Dave taught this class, and I took it from him, one of the things he suggested if people were having trouble creating round characters was to take your plot and force each of the characters you've already devised to be in a different role and write your story that way. For instance, we'll use generic epic fantasy, right? I've read so many of these, particularly by new authors, but also by published authors, where you've got, the solemn but earnest main character, the side character who is, who's really tells a lot of jokes or whatever, the silly side character. The heroine who's the romantic interest. That's basically who she is. The wise old wizard guy, right? You've got this core. And he said just put them in different roles. The love interest has to be the wise mentor. The quirky whatever has to be the main character. The solemn guy has to do something else. Like force them into each other's roles, and suddenly you are left with, instead of the cliche generic story, you're left with a whole bunch of square pegs and round holes. That people are trying to do things that don't fit what you first imagined them for the plot. Now, that's a simple and easy way to shake it up. I don't think it takes you where you need to go, but hopefully it opens up your eyes a little bit if you look at your own story and say, why have I put this character as the protagonist? How would my story be different if this character were the protagonist, or this character were the protagonist, or things like that? All right? So, don't let the quirks define them. Another thing to do is don't let their role define them, okay? If you are writing to let your character's role define them, you are going to very naturally fall into writing stereotypes. And beyond that, you are going to You're going to write a boring story, probably.
Sorry, what's just like an example that you have? Of,
The Smurfs.
Too many quirks.
Oh, too many quirks? Oh, too many quirks. It usually, what's that? Yeah, the Smurfs, not really. Like, a character can have too many. I see this sometimes, Freakazoid has a lot of quirks. The story's about his quirks, so it's okay if it's Freakazoid. But it would be hard to tell a serious story about Freakazoid. I see it mostly in new writers' fiction, where it's like, this person, you know, does jumping jacks every morning, and they, you know, only eat things that are red, and they only, and so you get this big list. They're so bizarre that they start to feel unreal because of that. Okay, did you have an example?
Does Luna Lovegood count? I mean,
maybe if Luna were the main character, you would have a problem. Luna is really defined by her quirks, isn't she? Yeah, there are a lot of Luna people like Luna. Okay, let's go to the girls. So, I said the Smurfs for this one. As your characters in something like the Smurfs, you have this problem where everyone is defined by their role. And it's part of the fun of the Smurfs as a cartoon, but it's also a really big crutch to I believe, the series. Particularly since, what is Smurfette's role?
She's the girl.
She's the girl. There's only one girl in the original Smurfs, and it's Smurfette, and she is defined by anything that a girl would do. Instead, she does. Yeah, that's all she is. But at the same time, a lot of the other characters are not any more well-rounded. Now, this is a kids show, yada yada yada, but you can apply a lot of feminist theory to this one. So how do you avoid this? One thing that I suggest is, number one, switch up the roles. Number two, start doing this, but ask yourself, you know, tell yourself, everyone is the hero of their story. Right? In their head, they're the hero of the story. Now, maybe their heroic duty is to be a really good friend. You know, Sam knew in Lord of the Rings that Frodo's job was to get the ring. You know, that's the big deal. But Sam is the viewpoint protagonist of his story, and through his eyes. And so Sam is not a role, Sam is a person. And you look at the things that define Sam, and you allow yourself to say, yes, he's an everyman. He loves gardening. He loves this. He likes his horse. He has all these sorts of things you want. He also is extremely confident in that he's superhumanly loyal. He's got this really great sort of sense of confidence, and you get this well-rounded character because all these things, he has some of the quirks, and he comes together into a very interesting character, even though he is a sidekick, right? And this is what you want to do. You want to say, in your sidekick's eyes, in this character's eyes, they are not X, Y, or Z of the role. They are an important part of the most important part in their own story. Another thing to avoid this is to watch out for tokenism. All right, tokenism is the Smurfette idea. If you're feeling that your characters are too flat, put in another character who's basically fulfilling the same role, quote unquote. Force yourself to say, okay, how are these two people different? If I have two young farm boys on a quest together to save the world, they can't both just be, you know, the generic farm boy. You've got to force yourself to distinguish. And if you have two, you know, goodness help us, you have two women in your epic fantasy story. One can't just be, you know, the romantic interest. They can't both be, I suppose they both can be romantic. You know what I mean? You're going to naturally force yourself to distinguish. Now, hopefully you're getting beyond this, but these are strategies you can use. If you're worried your characters are flat, put in another character from the same country, right? Fantasy stories do this all the time. It's like, everyone from this country is like this. Well, okay, put two of them in, and how are they different? Then suddenly your country and your characters become way more rounded because both of these people come from the same culture and don't act exactly the same. So therefore, you're making your culture more well-rounded. And this whole idea is to let your characters be real. Now, flaws. Flaws are the last kind of thing on this. What time do we have? We have time? 6:15. Okay, it's 6:25, man. Yeah, okay, we got 10 minutes for flaws. Good. So, flaws. Flawed characters, A flaw, I in my head define several different things. There are handicaps versus flaws. Now these are my own definitions. And when I'm building a character, I try to ask myself, what are their handicaps and what are their flaws? Handicaps are things they have to overcome that are not their fault. Not their fault and probably not going to get solved. Right? Classic example, a handicap for Superman is that Superman doesn't kill, right? At least in the classic stories. That's a handicap. It's not really his fault, or you could say it is, he made the decision, but it's not something to be solved. The essence of the story is not Superman should learn not to have this code of honor. The same way that a character who's like, I was born with one hand. This is a handicap. It's a very easy one to say because it is literally a handicap. It's not their fault, and by the end, the purpose of the story is not to say this character should have had two hands, right? That's not the idea. That is a separate plotting archetype for that character, a character growth archetype, and the flaw, which is something like this character is shy, right? Or this character is too greedy, yeah. These are things that the character has that are their fault, or even if they're not, they are things that the character has power over and should be changing through the course of the story and your personal opinion. It's just ways that I define these two things in my head, because sometimes, as writers, if you get these things mixed up, the whole promises and progression thing can get kind of messed up. There are certain things that are just who your character is, and they're not going to change. List them as a handicap. Why do we give characters flaws? What's the point? Yes?
If there are no flaws, we end up with Wesley Crusher, who everyone hates.
Yeah, poor Bill Wheaton. Yes, if you end up with a character that... Now, that's a danger, and it does happen, but Dirk Pitt doesn't have any flaws. If you've read these books, I read a few of them, I'm like, wow! Dirk Pitt has no flaws, and I'm okay with that. Dirk Pitt is just the ultimate superhero in book 4. So that works for those books. And I want to make mention of the fact that you can and have and write books like that. They can be very enjoyable. For instance, I would say that Drizzt has no flaws, just a lot of handicaps. Right? He is a character in a book. He's the Dark Elf books by Bob Salvatore, who has mostly handicaps and not many flaws. And he's a very much action hero in a fantasy book form, and it follows those archetypes. He has overwhelming odds. Everyone hates him because of his skin color. He has this horrible culture that he came from, but he's a good guy, and he mostly does good things. Flawed characters, however, we have found across the last, particularly 40, 50 years of storytelling, have this sort of sympathetic thing, because they have fears, they have real life concerns, they have problems, and it helps us both with creating people who are well-rounded and also creating this sort of likability. It's hard to really, you can like someone, but it's hard to be sympathetic towards someone for whom nothing goes wrong and who is right all the time, and things like this. We get tired of those characters. So, characters with flaws give us this sort of connection to them. And it allows us to write these characters that have the 1 foot in relatability and 1 foot in the superhuman competence. How do you come up with flaws? Well, it really depends on the type of story you're telling and how powerful you want your flaw to be and the promises you're making your reader. If your story is one where you're promising this character's going to have an arc and they're going to learn some things, then you can make their flaws very upfront. What's the danger I said in that a few weeks ago? Do you remember? If you make all their flaws up front and then don't make them active or competent, you're going to have a story that's really hard to get into. Okay? This is why I'm talking about these things. If you're going to have this character who's got a major character flaw, trying to think of some in modern fiction who are like this. Yes, you can point at Scrooge, right? But Scrooge's story is a very different sort of story, where it's like, here's this awful person. It's more like a morality tale. Back in the Middle Ages, a lot of the stories that were told were these morality tales. Here's this awful person. Here's what happens to them. And then this has the twist ending that, oh, he becomes good. Which is actually a twist ending from that era, because before they got eaten by bears. The fairy tale version is, if you're the bad person, the bears are going to eat you. But coming up with a character like this, trying to think of some good ones. Yeah.
I had a friend who had a hard time with the last one, just because Locke is not a very reputable guy, and you get right from the beginning, he has done some horrible things, and he really doesn't feel bad about them.
Right.
And then we're going to get into more of his personality.
Yeah. Yeah. There's the movie As Good as It Gets. Very unlikable, flawed character who also is highly confident, and his confidence is making us laugh because he's really witty. But that works. So just keep in mind these sort of things. But you do want to make flawed characters. You want to, in most stories, come up with something, which is the idea of come up with some handicaps that are going to hold them back. Come up with some flaws that theoretically can work into their past and who they are, that you can intertwine with some of these other things that then can be something that they work on. How powerful that flaw is, at first, really depends on the type of story you're telling. All right, what questions do you guys have? We have 2 minutes left or something? Let's do one question. Anyone have a question on characters? I'm going to have a friend of mine. I'm going to be gone for 3 weeks of this while I'm on tour for Words Radiance. And so you're going to have 3 substitutes, and it's probably going to be Jancy, who writes YA teen fiction and who is published in YA teen fiction. Writes great books. And I've asked her to talk on character and voice. We're going to have Howard come in, who is a visual storyteller who probably draw stuff for you on the board, but he will talk about humor. And what else did I say I would talk about? Oh, world building. He's really great at world building. And we're going to have Eric James Stone come in, who is an award-winning short fiction writer. We'll ask him about talking about short fiction. He won the Nebula Award for a Mormon bishop in space. I guess he's the branch president. That's not, that's like the Academy Award in science fiction fantasy, and he won it for a story about an LDS branch president in the sun who's dealing with sun beings. Who are worried about keeping the law of chastity. He really did. It's awesome. And things like that. He'll come in, he'll talk about that, and I'll have to talk about short fiction about plot, okay? All right, we'll go ahead and break. Here's an folder. Isaac has been, he's pro-tagged and brought this and slide things in. And I'll be up here to talk to you guys for a few minutes. Drink whatever you guys are.